Good afternoon. How are you? It's Elaine Lindsay with True Social Media, here as your host of Business Banter Plus TV show. I'm so glad to be here today with someone that I really respect. Hello, Michael. Michael Hughes is with us today.
Hi, Elaine.
So great to have you. It's actually, folks, going to take me a little bit of time to do this intro because I have to tell you Michael's been around the block a little bit, and he has so much incredible experience. He's got more than 3 decades of experience in the business world. He's the founder and the CEO of NFR Consulting Group. NFR stands for Networking for Results, and that is trademark to Michael. He's an international networking expert. He coaches businesses, corporate, and sales professionals to achieve better results by improving their networking skills. Now, I think it's really amazing that his company is focused solely on networking for results, and we're definitely going to talk about that. Michael is the recipient of the 2015 Canadian Association of Professional Speakers Warren Evans Spirit of Caps Award. And he has a long, long client list that includes such organizations as Sun Microsystems, Scotiabank, Dell, and Staples. Michael has a really, really interesting path, I guess we'll call it, because he took himself from being an out of work professional to chairman of the board of directors of the Ottawa Chamber of Commerce. And they are one of Canada's oldest and most respected business organizations. Further to that, I think it's really important to note Michael is one of only 6 Canadian professional speakers that hold the prestigious Platinum Speaker Resource Accreditation for Meeting Planners International. That's the largest worldwide body of meeting planners and conference organizers in the world. I have to say that from my experience, he is a genuinely helpful and considerate gentleman, and I'm very lucky that we both live in the same town. Michael, that's only a little part of who you are and what you do, but I wanted to maybe start some questions and have you give me a little more information about some of the other facets that make up Michael Hughes.
Sure.
So I know that when I read your bio, you worked for Canadian Tire Corporation.
Yeah, I spent 23 years in the corporate world, Elaine. I spent 13 years with local Woolworth, which is now Walmart, followed by 10 years with Canadian Tire. I worked in management and sales there. And I tell people at the peak of my corporate career, I was literally and figuratively fired into success.
Yeah, wow. See, now that's the sort of thing I want you to take today, folks, because Michael turns everything around into something wonderfully positive. So keep letting us know a little bit more of exactly how you made that leap.
Well, and Elaine, I'm in the spirit of full disclosure, I've got to tell you, I can look back now and say I was literally and figuratively fired into success. But when it happened, it was a traumatic experience, as it is for many people. But I guess the message from that is look, when that happened to me, I kind of did one of those big reflective experiences and sat down and said, what do I want to do with the rest of my life? And I did one of those, I'm mad as heck, I'm never taking this anymore. I've never put my future in someone else's hands. I said, I'm going to start my own company. So I started a little training company, and I started doing training for everybody and anybody on everything and anything. And quite frankly, I was starving to death. I wasn't doing very well. And so I remember sitting down with one of my mentors, and I explained my situation to him. And, he looked at me and he said, Mike, you're a one-person company. You've got to pick a lane. And what he meant was you got to pick one topic, one area of focus, one specialty. And so from that point, the thinking process I went through after that brought me to this little piece, which was networking, which I saw as an area of interest, an area of need in the marketplace. So I started studying that and investing more time looking at it from a business or professional standpoint. And I've been doing that for the last 20 plus years.
Wow. Wow, that's really quite admirable because yes, I understand it absolutely makes sense that there had to be trauma involved. I mean, that it's huge when all of a sudden you're no longer doing something you've been doing for, quite frankly, decades. But taking that information from that person who told you to focus on one niche. I think we're all very lucky that the niche you chose was, of course, networking. I have to say that I had heard about you for so long before we actually got to meet. It's um, it's quite a lot of kudos that I've heard over the years, and I think that comes from the fact that you are genuinely helpful to everybody that you encounter, and that in itself makes you very, very different.
Well, thank you, Elaine, and that's what that's a result of is the fact that over the years, what I've learned to do is I've learned to appreciate the value that others have. And when people think about networking, they think about this schmoozing thing, the smile and the handshake thing we do at business, and to me, networking is much deeper than that. It represents a fundamental premise, a resource by which all of us live and interact with one another because we're social beings, right? And so what I've looked at networking as, and this wasn't an overnight realization. This evolved over a period of time as I moved from looking at networking as a prospecting activity, which most professionals do, most sales professionals and business professionals do, to a more strategic approach around leveraging networks, to a deeper appreciation of networking's fundamental premise. And really, if you think about it, you know, all of us network every single day. We do it formally and informally with people we meet, with people we know. But if you really think about it, networking is a catalyst that actually causes us to connect with others and build the powerful relationships that are the basis for success in business and in life.
Oh, that's so well put. And actually, I'm going to say thank you because that takes a different tack on something I've said for years. I've said that basically every interaction that we have as human beings with another human being is actually sales. Now, networking sounds much better, but when you are talking to your spouse or your children or your neighbor, even before you get to business, you're selling the idea that you're putting forth. You're selling spending time with you. You're selling whatever it is that's coming out of your mouth, and ideally it is all a form of networking. And I love the fact that you've taken it away from that sort of on the hunt prospecting.
Well, yeah. One of the biggest misconceptions when it comes to networking, whether it's in a formal context at a networking event, whether it's some kind of environment where you work in the corporate world and you're trying to get ahead, there's a misconception that people will buy from us, will refer us, or will give us a promotion after a 30-second to 3-minute conversation. And the reality is, it just doesn't work that way, because as consumers, as purchasers, we're all too informed, we're all too aware, and we're all too cautious. And you use the word sales, and it's absolutely true that most of us, are 90% of the population, are in some form of sales mode, whether it's an idea, a concept, a product, a service, whatever it is. But if you think in terms of what selling is, one of the biggest paradigm shifts, a mindset shift I had was a number of years ago when a good friend of mine, Canada's sales coach, Tom Stoyan, helped me understand that selling is really about helping others make a buying decision. It's about helping others make a buying decision. Well, how do you make others make a buying decision about you, about what you have to sell, what you want, where you're going? It's helping them appreciate you more as an individual. So networking as a concept is really a fundamental premise of the connections we make, the conversations we have, and the collaborative approach we have as we interact with others.
Yeah, that was so well explained. And as a matter of fact, I'm not going to use the term sales anymore because it is more about networking, and even so with our children, etc. But I think we don't understand what the difference is truly from networking to prospecting. People, I'm sure it's happened to you as well. You go to a networking breakfast or a lunch or what have you, and there is a certain number of the people there will basically, before they say hello, they'll shove their business card in your hand. And the others, you'll see there's another little group that are so terrified, they don't even know how to say hello. So it's become such a huge part of business that we have so many people that are afraid of it, and so many people that I think they rush at you like that to try and get it over with.
Well, and there's a couple of different avenues there based on what you said. See, the fundamental premise about networking is it's something that a lot of people tell me, I don't know how you do that. You look so comfortable about it. But essentially, all of us are good networkers. We're social beings, right? We need to be with others. Every person that's listening to this call has a vibrant and dynamic network that they've evolved and developed over a period of time. It's just who we are. Where the issue comes in is when we feel we need to walk into a room and we need to sell something. We need to get a promotion. We need to look for that next job. Then all of a sudden the pressure comes in because we feel we've got to ask for something. We feel that needs to happen during that conversation. But if you really think about it, the way things really work is in general, we buy people first, ideas second, and things last in that order. That's how life works all the time, right? We buy people first, ideas second, and things last in that order. And I keep reminding professionals that go to networking event, I say, do you have a better chance of trying to sell that person on your product, your service, or referring you to someone in a 30-second conversation in a room full of people, or in a one-on-one chat over coffee or lunch a week later?
Yeah.
But well, invariably, they always say the second option. So what I try and tell them is, if that's what works, stop trying to use that conversation to sell. Instead, give that person a reason to want to meet with you again. And how will they do that? Well, it's when you can have a conversation with them and you focus on them as a person, getting to know them for who they are. You will be more perceived as being more professional, more personable, and others will want to talk to you again.
Absolutely. And I know that now the time frame, if you will, for someone to buy has stretched out so far now. We're talking anywhere from 18 to 36 months. And I think that comes from, well, one of the things I think it comes from is the fact that we are all so knowledgeable now.
Well, and Elaine, it all depends on the products or services that we sell, that we want others to buy. But fundamentally, it's appreciating how and why people buy. See, people buy as a result of the connections they have with others. It's all about relationships. A guy told me a long time ago, he said, success in business and life is all about relationships. So if that's true, and just about everyone I ask that question, they say, you're absolutely right. So if you think about that, you say, you know what? It's more about building relationships with people who then see the value that we have and will want to buy our products or services. See, making a purchase is a byproduct of a relationship. Relationships are about three things. They're about trust, value, and contribution. That's an essential thing. If you could think about the 2 or 3 highest value relationships you have in your life right now, anyone watching this program, if you go through that same little exercise, if you think about the faces that popped into your mind or the names that came into your head, those people, those important people, those deep, meaningful relationships, did that happen overnight? Well, most people say, well, no, it took time, because relationships take time. They need to be nurtured and they require investment. So you see, networking is what actually launches and then accelerates that whole process when it's done well, when it's done effectively and productively.
Wow, that's all fabulous. What I'd like you to say, because I know people are watching and going, well, yeah, that's easy to say because you're really good at it and you speak well and you know how to do this. But we all started somewhere. And I think perhaps you can give those that are very new to the business environment, or especially those that have transitioned from a corporate structure to being on their own as an entrepreneur, or perhaps, you know, in a small private company. What would you suggest to them are, say, the three first steps you should take to solidify yourself as a serious networker?
Okay. I guess my response to that would be to help people shift their thinking from wanting to be a good networker to connecting with the right people. And that's what it's all about. See, what I keep reminding people is, you know what, networking is something we do all the time. We do it formally, we do it informally, we do it with our family, we do it with our friends. You know, when the kids are playing hockey and you chat with other parents, when you go to a community event, when you go to a church social. See, it's something we're doing all the time. So I suggest to people, go back to that foundation, go back to that comfortable feeling, take the sales or the business piece and put it away. Put it away for now and focus on having a conversation with someone. Because when you start doing that, what happens is you change your entire mindset, you change your perspective, you change the way you are perceived by others. So when I start talking about that, people say, well, that makes perfect sense, but how do I do it? Because they're not sure where to start.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of different pieces. Here's what I tell people. I say, first question I ask is, how many of you have ever hosted a party? Well, we all have, right? So what I suggest to them, no matter where you are, what event you're at, pretend you're the host or hostess, so that when you walk up to someone or they walk up to you, take charge of the conversation. Because when you're a host, people come in and say, hi, how are you? Thanks for coming. So glad you could make it. I'm pleased you're here. Take that same mindset, that same perspective, so you get the conversation started. Because starting the conversation is hard. 90% plus of professionals, Elaine, have a huge issue about meeting others. It's the way we are as human beings. It's a chemical reaction that happens in our brain when we walk up to someone or they walk up to us. What happens in our brain, the limbic brain, which is the oldest brain, has as its primary role to protect us from harm. So anytime it perceives we're in danger, real or perceived, it releases a chemical. It's called cortisol, and it shoots down into the heart, starts streaming blood flow so that it kicks into flight or fight syndrome. So when you walk into a room with people you don't know and you look around, your limbic brain says, I'm not sure of this environment. My goodness, I'm not sure what to do. So I'm going to stand on guard here. And it creates almost a brain freeze. That's why we can't remember names, right? When do you normally hear a person's name? As soon as you meet them. And so your brain is almost, now within about 2 or 3 seconds, the strategic brain takes over, and all of a sudden it says, wait a minute now, what are you all excited about? This isn't danger. This is just a networking event. So then you calm down a little bit. It's like a speed bump.
Yeah.
So most people associate that discomfort, that uncomfortable feeling with networking when it's a chemical reaction we all go through. Now, you can't stop it, Elaine. It's intrinsic, it's subconscious, but you can minimize it by understanding what's happening. So I'm sure anyone taking part in this program can go back and think about, yes, I remember that happening to me, and now I understand why. So remember, the big piece is, not only is this happening to you, it's happening to the other person. Now that you realize what's happening and why, if you can make it easier, more comfortable for the other person, you of course make them feel more comfortable, more at ease, more secure, which in fact is a basis of trust. They don't understand why, but all of a sudden they feel more comfortable with you. That's why initiating the conversation is so powerful and effective. So in just starting off, the 2-3 things I suggest to folks, first of all, be yourself. Go back to yourself as a social being. Think in terms of getting the conversation started. Make it easy for the other person, because they sense discomfort, aren't sure why, and you can facilitate that process. Then all of a sudden, once the conversation gets going, as a general rule, it flows along fairly well. You find things you have in common. You get that conversation going. It's like an engine starting.
Yeah, it has to warm up a little.
Yeah.
It's just funny in what you're saying and in what I know, because we are such social animals, it is such a contradiction that the minute we try to be social, our limbic brain goes into fight or flight and basically holds you off. So it's sort of a double-edged sword to get out there. What I'd like you to let people know is, does it get easier?
Does it get any easier?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, absolutely it does. Because let me tell you what happens next. Because I'm sure anyone that I just took through that little scenario will say, geez, I remember now. I understand a little why I'm uncomfortable when I walk into a room or when someone walks up to me. I can understand what's happening in my brain. But the brain also keeps working. So as soon as that person walks up and you get past that initial speed bump, the cortisol is dissipating, and the brain actually sends out a second chemical, second of four chemicals that actually come out during a networking interaction. The second chemical is called serotonin. And it comes out right after the cortisol, because once the brain realizes that there's no danger there, it falls into its secondary mode, which is survival. And we as human beings have survived for millions of years. One of the reasons why we've survived is because we are pack animals. We survive in packs, right? We realize the benefit of being together in a group for protection, for procreation, and for productivity. So as soon as you get past that initial 2-3 seconds and the cortisol dissipates, serotonin starts to come down. Serotonin is known as the cuddle chemical because it fosters context, connection. So as soon as you start connecting with that person, finding things you have in common with them, then all of a sudden there's a bonding sense that you have. And what happens is the nerve ends that carry the serotonin actually go down into your gut. That's why when you meet somebody and you say to yourself, you know what, I've got a gut feeling that she's okay. Or you know what, my gut's telling me I'm not too sure about him. That's the serotonin that is acting and helping that happen. So that's why after that initial speed bump, the conversation generally gets a little easier and can build and grow. And our job as master networkers, if you will, is to foster that conversation and build it with context. Context is the most powerful bonding agent we can have with another human being.
Context. Okay, that's good. That's good. So we're now getting used to, we're getting a little bit of feedback here. So let's see if I can maybe turn that down a little. So now you've got that first networking event under your belt. You're a little bit easier going in. It's, as we always say to clients, when you're dealing with people, and especially the online world and social media has made it, brought it really to the forefront. Everything is about them, not about you. So we have to work that into our networking as well, don't we?
Well, yeah, and if you think in terms of the progression of a networking interaction as you have it, isn't it true that in the initial stages, you'll have that conversation? Well, generally within about 5 seconds of meeting someone at any kind of professional event, what's the question you get asked? You get asked,
what do you
do, right? And the reality is that's a default question. That's what you think you should ask or what you're told to ask because you want to go right to business. But if we go back to foundational principles, we buy people first, ideas second, and things last in that order. So the smartest thing any professional can do, whether it's a business professional, a corporate professional, or an entrepreneur, is to take that business agenda they have and put it in their back pocket or in their purse and extend that personal conversation to get to know that individual. Why? Because the more you connect with someone, the more they'll see you as different, the more they'll be happy to meet with you again. I get professionals tell me all the time, they say, Michael, I've only got about 30 seconds. What happens if I don't talk business? And I tell people, I say, isn't that a wonderful opportunity to find a reason to meet again? You know, when you tell people, geez, the seminar is starting now, we didn't get a chance to talk business. Could I get your card? I'd love to follow up and find out more about you. And when that person says yes, then it means that they're willing to see you. See, we talked about sales earlier, Elaine. And to me, sales is about 3 things. It's about prospecting, presenting, and following up. It's a process, right? It's a process. The prospecting piece is getting to know about that person, getting to know who they are, what's important to them. That's the most powerful piece. So the longer that conversation goes on from a personal perspective, the more connected you become with that person, the more the relationship starts, because the relationship is already there, but it's very fragile. Now, if that networking interaction goes on long enough, other people will look at you and will say, you know what? I kind of like her. She's nice. I wonder what she does so that I can find out if she can help me or whether there's somebody I know who can help. It's a natural extension of the relationship because it's already a relationship. So you see, that magic question, what do you do, will come up in the networking interaction if it goes on long enough. But even if it doesn't come up, that doesn't mean that it's a lost opportunity. It just means you can use that as a springboard to connect with them again. But when they ask that magic question, we all know what it is, what do you do? Most professionals make a huge mistake here. They figure they're asking for a sales presentation. And when I ask you that question, Elaine, if I connect with you and we have a nice conversation, I kind of look at you and say, I kind of like her. I wonder what she does. The surface question I have is, what do you do? What I really want to know, Elaine, is what's your value? What's your value? Because we've got a basis of trust already. We've got to know one another. I want to know what your value is. And so people don't think in terms of that. They've never thought about it in terms of a sales presentation, if you will. They've never thought about what are the most important criteria to share with a person at that time to communicate effectively. My experience has been there are three key areas of focus of communication you need to share with folks. The first one is, what's your target market? Who do you want to connect with? Who do you help? Who do you work with? The second one is, what's the number one benefit that your products or services provide to that target market? Because you want to know how you can help people. And you know what? If you stop there, Elaine, that would be effective communication.
Right.
Your target market and your benefit. But there's one more piece of information. If you can share it with people at that time, it anchors your value, has them remember it to a point where they can in fact share with others. That third piece of information is, what is the result for people when they do business with you?
Right. Right.
So it's about building context as long as you can, longer than you think you should, staying away from business. And when it gets to a point that other person asks you, what do you do? It's about understanding they want to know what your value is. So it's about communicating effectively about what your value is. And that's around three key pieces of information: your target market, the primary benefit, and the most tangible result that you provide.
Okay. Wow. I hope everybody's taking notes because this is absolute gold. And it's true. I mean, that is the question on everybody's mind. It's the first thing off everybody's lips is, yeah, what do you do? And rather than asking people what do they do, because I'm going to go right back to the very, very start for people, because often we get to talk to an expert like you, and later people say, yeah, he told me this and he told me this, but what I really want to know, okay, what should I say exactly? What are, say, three things as soon as you shake hands with someone and get their name? What are three things you could say instead of what do you do?
Okay. And you know what? That's a very valid question, because every time I start talking about this to people, they say, well, my goodness, I'm not sure what to say, what to ask. So here's what I tell people. I'll give you the two pieces. I'll give you an acronym that can be act as a little strategy for folks, and then I'll give you my secret formula so that if people want to do that, they can use it. So here's the first one. Here's what I tell people, and this is at the initial contact when you first meet someone. First one is realize that it's uncomfortable for them, so take charge of the conversation. That's things like introducing yourself. It's starting the conversation. It's about being enthusiastic, being positive. It's about smiling, and a sincere smile, because that projects that you're friendly, that you're open, that you're happy to be with them. And then the last one is to put the total focus on the other person. So I tell people it's a test. It's always a test of your professionalism.
Yeah.
Let's take charge, be enthusiastic, smile, put the total focus on the other person. And then once the conversation starts, people don't realize, but even just at that first point of contact, The spark of the relationship is already there. This is hard for people to grasp, but it's absolutely true. I've done presentations and I tell people, I say, look across the room, find somebody you don't know, just make eye contact with them or her and wave, acknowledge. And when they do that, all of a sudden they realize there's a connection there. Now, once the conversation starts, Elaine, it's important to understand that the relationship is already there, but it's very fragile. So you need to keep the conversation safe. How can you do that? Well, you use topics that are relationship enhancing and relationship building. So the topic areas are, I keep the conversation safe. So safe talks about areas of focus that are sincere, focus on a structure, and focus on things that you have in common. It could be something like, have you ever been to this event before? Are you here because of this speaker? Do you belong to this association? It's getting the conversation started. It's about activities, A for activities. And people give us clues. They give us clues in what they wear, in how they look. I had a lady today at a networking breakfast I attended. I just looked at her and I said, you've got to tell me where you just went on holiday. She had this gorgeous tan. And of course she said, well, I was just in Maui. So I let her tell me all about that. So it was great. So it's all about that. F is for family. And again, this isn't about interrogating people. It's about allowing the conversation to evolve and then seizing those points. You know, oh, geez, it was so hard with the kids this morning. It was getting cold out there. So how many kids have you got? So you get, you know, you ask me about, I've got a 3-year-old granddaughter, Elaine. I'll talk to you about her all day. And then the E is for current events. Current events. So safe topics, structured activities, family, current events. So those are 2 little templates I give people. But let me give you my all-time favorite, the one I use most often. So when I meet someone like Elaine, I will say, introduce myself, say, hi, Elaine, I'm Michael. And then, of course, you introduce yourself. So then I just look at you and I say, tell me about Elaine. So that opens the door for you to start talking to me about you. And then I can just guide the conversation. And then so it's easy. Now, it works for me. Some people aren't comfortable with that. They feel it's a little forward. I found it really works. Yeah. But it's all about getting because once you get past that speed bump, yeah, the conversation tends to have and now the next point people generally mention to me, Elaine, is say, well, what happens, Michael, if these people haven't been to your course and they go right away to business and say, what do you do? Yeah. What I remind people is, remember, that's a default question they're asking. So it's what they think they should ask. So I just give them a very little piece of information rather than launching everything, and I give it back to them. I'll say, they'll say, what do you do, Michael? I say, I'm a consultant. Tell me about what you do. So they'll say, well, you know, I'm a general manager for, and I'll say, how long have you been there? Have you always been there? You've been there your entire career? Say, well, no, I've only been there about 3 years. And, you know, I was in Calgary. And said, tell me about how you got from Calgary to here. What happened? So they'll tell me the whole story. So it's all about managing the conversation, realizing that the important piece here is the relationship, not the revenues. The revenues are an outflow of the relationship.
Wow. Wow. Just in what you've given people today, that is so incredibly valuable, because when you remove fear, it really makes things a lot easier on everybody present. I really thank you for that, Michael. It's quite awesome. What I wanted to do now, since you've given so much, I wanted to take a few moments and let me ask you about something I think is very important to you, and that's the philanthropy that you do. Now, I want to make sure that I have this right, but I think you're the national chair of the Canadian Association of the Professional Speakers Charitable Foundation, correct?
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
And I know that you work with Outcare.
That's right.
Which deals with palliative care.
Yeah, end of life care is one of the biggest issues that we have in our society today. And I don't know if anyone part of this program realizes it, but none of us are getting out of this alive, Elaine.
Yeah.
It's a true fact. Yet there's a whole stigma about talking about that, what our wishes are and how we want it handled. And you know, research has shown that 80% of people die slowly as opposed to fast. And you know, 80% of people say, or 90% of people, the majority of people who are in the end of life stages say, I want to die with dignity. I want to die. I don't want to be a burden to my family. And I want to do it in an environment that I'm comfortable with. And so most people say, well, geez, you know, that's the way we should make it happen. But the reality is over 80% of people die in hospitals,
Yeah.
as opposed to in somewhere that they're comfortable with. So the Outcare Foundation is an organization that is an independent entity that supports the palliative care industry, hospices, palliative care departments, and things like that you wouldn't think about. We have the Ottawa Mission here for homeless people.
Yes.
that has a palliative care wing. Because where do they go to die, right? There's Rogers House here in Ottawa that deals with palliative care for children. And so what we do is we raise funds and supply services and support to the organizations and individuals who are in the palliative care industry, because there's a huge gap between the funding that the government gives and the real needs that folks have. Thanks for asking about that.
Well, I wanted to ask because, you know, I tend to do research when I'm looking at having guests on the show. And the whole concept really fascinated me because we were all involved with lots of charities, and you hear about all kinds of charities because they're very vocal. But you're absolutely right. People don't want to talk about end of life. And I have to admit, I'm one of the worst. Every time my father started talking about arrangements, I would just la 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 la. No, 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 don't want to hear it. Have realized that we not only need to be able to talk about it, but we need to put more effort into making it okay for everyone.
Yeah,
And
the two pieces that we're focused on now, first of all, is raising awareness, which
yeah,
is what we're doing here. And the second thing is education. And that's helping people understand what are the steps you need to take. And the Outcare Foundation, if this is resonating with anyone who's watching the program, you go to outcarefoundation.org, and we have a little publication that we've made called Advanced Care Planning. And it can help you come up with the steps you need to do in order to get that plan ready for yourself, share it with your loved ones, and communicate that to the folks that you want to be aware of what happens when the time comes.
absolutely. And I will make sure, okay, we will have all of this information available on Michael's page on Business Banter Plus TV. I think as much as it's quite a step away from what we were talking about, I so appreciate everything you've offered us today, Michael. That was just amazing. And I want to say to those of you that it does resonate with, or anyone that you know that wants to know something, we'll make sure we have the link for the outcarefoundation.org on Michael's page. And we'll also, I suggest, I did not know that there was a palliative care piece to the mission. It's not something I ever thought of. The mission is one of the charities that our family is very involved in, and yet didn't know that. So obviously, we all have a lot of work to do to make sure that this awareness stretches farther than just those that are involved. So in wrapping up today, Michael, I would like to ask if you would mind sharing a quick little tip that people can implement in their lives, be it personal or business or both, but immediately. Just some little thing that we can help them with today.
Thank you, Elaine. Yeah, and you know, and this is especially important at this time of year when people are thinking that the business cycle is dropping down, and we're getting into that holiday season. And the point is that connections and conversations you have at this time of year are more impactful, they're more powerful, because it's about people, right? It's about this time of year. So let me leave you with this little thought. Every person you meet has the potential to help you to the extent that he or she is willing and able. Your mission, I believe your obligation, is to stimulate their willingness as you discover their ability relative to your situation.
Wow. Thank you so much, Michael. That was wonderful. Just amazing. I'm going to say, wow, I bet everybody's just in a bit of a stupor right now. This was a very powerful show. I thank you, Michael, so much for this. Just absolute reams of great information. And I hope that you take it to heart and use what Michael's given you. These tools are amazing. Don't forget about outcarefoundation.org. And we will have, as per usual, links for Michael and Michael's information on his page on Business Banter. One last thing I wanted to say is Michael has a great little ebook that you can download from his site. You just have to opt in, give him your email address, and we will have that link for you as well. Is there a specific name for the book, Michael?
Yeah, it's called Managing the Networking Experience. It's a summary of everything I've talked about today and the entire process that I share with folks.
Oh, that's absolutely perfect. So go ahead. You'll be able to download that as well and become great networkers like Michael Hughes. Thanks again, folks. Elaine Lindsay of True Social Media, your host, as always, for Business Banter Plus TV show. And I wish each and every one of you very happy holidays. From our home, it's Merry Christmas. To everyone else, whatever you celebrate, please have a safe, happy, and family and friend filled time. And remember that there's other people that have a bit less than you. So reach out and do what you can. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.